On the record in state of Michigan versus Dante Marvell, 2301417FY.
Thank you. Aaron Housefield on behalf of the people.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Jared Austin, appearing on behalf of Mr. Hughes, present with me at council table.
And you, sir, you're Dante?
Yes.
Thank you. Today's the date for our adjourned preliminary examination date. It's my understanding the parties are not in agreement on how to proceed, so we're going to hold a preliminary examination. Any preliminary matters before we begin taking testimony?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. One of the officers in this matter is still working in an undercover capacity. So the people would ask that for the safety of the officer and the integrity of any ongoing investigations that the court not live stream so that the officer's face is not put out with his proper name and law enforcement designation.
So are you asking me to turn off the live stream during his testimony or just not show his face?
The preference would be to turn it off during the testimony, but certainly at a minimum, I would ask that his face not be shown. There's not an issue as to voice, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Austin?
I don't have,
Objection to that?
I do not have an objection to that request, Your Honor.
There's no right to a live stream, and I don't have a problem with turning it off. I just need you to give me a heads up when that witness is going to testify.
What? Oh, yes, my apologies. Before we continue, Your Honor, Mr. Hughes wanted me to make an additional request on his behalf for adjournment before we proceed with preliminary examination.
Sure, I haven't finished asking her for her preliminary matters.
Okay, understood.
Okay, agreed, you will tell me before, so I can turn it off?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was looking at you for you to say, okay, I'll let you know.
Sorry, I just didn't know if Mr. Austin needed to say something in that moment. So yes, Your Honor, certainly he is the anticipated third witness in
Okay.
order. Additionally, Your Honor, there is a stipulation between the parties. I can place that now or reserve that.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. It is my understanding that the parties will be stipulating that the controlled substance that will be testified to in this matter is in fact the controlled substance cocaine, and that stipulation will be made without the requirement of any additional witness to lay that foundation.
And is that right, Mr. Austin?
That is correct, Your Honor. I have no good faith belief that the substance recovered is anything other than what they purport it to be tested for, so I would not object to that. That stipulation is limited to this hearing only. That is correct.
Okay. Any other preliminary matters from the people?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Mr. Austin?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. I am ready to proceed. Mr. Humes informs me that he needs additional time to secure retained counsel, and he would respectfully ask this court to grant him another brief adjournment to do so.
Now, this case was originally scheduled to go to exam on May 26th. It is now June 22nd. The original arraignment date being May 5th. This case has been pending for about 7 weeks at this point. Motion to adjourn is denied. Any other preliminary matters?
I would just ask for sequestration of witnesses, Your Honor, as it appears there's going to be multiple witnesses.
Okay. Ms. Housefield, do you object to the motion for sequestration?
Not at all, Your Honor.
Sequestration is ordered.
Okay, good. Be shown on page what it makes related. My face is being broadcast. Why can't this so said or witness face can't be broadcast? But then, no. He's an officer, right? That ain't my problem. That's why I need to hire my own attorney.
Now, so the courtroom is required to be public and people are allowed to come in here and watch court as much as they want. You have no right to any of this being live streamed. We live stream it out of courtesy. Sometimes we don't live stream because it's inconvenient or because the topic is not appropriate. So as far as any complaints about me turning off the live stream during witness number 3 has nothing to do with your lawyer's competency here today or your representation. You've delayed this case already, Mr. Humes. We're starting.
Well, I didn't delay it. The guy just called me back 2 days ago.
That doesn't change where we're at right now, sir. If you could not retain counsel timely, you have appropriate counsel appointed to you. We're starting today. He can sub in tomorrow and take over the case from this point forward. But what we're doing today is starting today.
Can you put that on record?
Yeah, she's recording everything I just
Deny me
said.
that I can't hire my own lawyer.
I didn't say you can't. I said today we're starting. That's what I
don't wanna
said.
start today. I want my own
No,
lawyer.
it's not up to you whether we start today. This has been scheduled twice. We're starting today. That's what's happening right now. Okay?
I don't agree.
Okay. You have the right to disagree, but you cannot stop what's about to happen. All right. Anything else?
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay. Your first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The people would call to the stand Officer Bailey.
I'm honored. Is it possible I can get your oath number and bond?
My what?
Oath and bond number?
Don't have an oath and bond number.
No.
No. You get to the top there, look at me and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Have a seat there. You seem loud, but I'll remind you anyway. The plexiglass interferes with my hearing, so you do have to be pretty loud. The lady behind you is typing your answers, so please answer with words that we can type, like yes or no. You shake your head or say, we have not found a good way to type that. When you forget, we'll remind you. Please state your first and last name and spell them into the record.
Yep. My name is Officer.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir. Are you employed?
Yes.
How are you employed?
To the city of Lansing as a police officer.
How long have you been with the Lansing Police Department?
Just under 5 years.
And were you on duty on May 4th, 2023?
Yes.
And what did your duties that day include?
I was conducting overtime, assisting the Tri-County Metro Narcotics team with hotspot enforcement.
And that was a set assignment on that day?
Correct.
And did there come a time that you observed a black Chrysler 300?
Yes.
And was that at the America Best Motel?
It was in the area of Penn and Miller, which is right next to America's Best.
And when you say Penn, is that short for Pennsylvania Avenue?
Yes.
And are you familiar with the Lansing city limits?
Yes.
And is that location, Pennsylvania and Miller, within the city of Lansing, county of Ingham, state of Michigan?
Yes.
And is there something that drew your attention to that vehicle?
Yes.
And what was that?
Tri-County Undercover Narcotics observed the vehicle and advised via radio that they observed the vehicle leaving America's Best.
So you didn't have any observations of what the vehicle was doing at the hotel. Is that a correct statement?
Correct.
Okay. So at the time that you became aware of it, where were you located?
I was at the southwest corner of South Pennsylvania and East Miller.
And what were you doing?
I was staging in the area to intercept any vehicles that the Tri-County Metro had advised they had seen suspicious activity within that hotel.
And in addition to the information that you were working with from Tri-County Metro, did you yourself observe any infractions of the motor vehicle code?
Yes.
What did you observe?
I observed the vehicle to have window tint.
Now, is window tint illegal?
Yes.
All window tint?
On the driver's side, driver windows.
And could you describe for the court, did the window tint on the driver's side cover the entirety of the window?
Yes.
Did you effectuate a traffic stop?
Yes.
And did the vehicle stop for you?
Yes.
Where did that stop occur?
In the 5900 block of South Cedar Street.
Did you approach the vehicle?
I did.
And at the time, how were you dressed, sir?
In a fully marked patrol capacity uniform.
And were you also in a marked vehicle?
Yes.
And as you approached the vehicle, which side did you make approach?
The driver's side.
As you approached, were you able to see into the vehicle as it relates to occupants?
Yes.
Okay. Were you able to tell how many occupants were in the vehicle?
Yes.
How many occupants?
One.
And as you approached, what, if anything, did you observe of that occupant?
I observed the driver to have multiple documents in his hand. When I made contact with him, I asked him for the documents.
Okay. And as you approached, prior to making contact and asking him for the documents, did you know anything of anything that he was doing inside the vehicle?
I couldn't see from until I got up to the window.
So you approached the vehicle and made contact, is that correct?
Correct.
And did you speak with the driver?
I did.
And if you saw that person again, would you recognize him or her?
Yes.
And what was the gender?
Male.
Do you see the driver in the courtroom today?
Yes.
And could you please indicate something for the court that the driver of the vehicle on May 4 is wearing today?
Yes, he's wearing a white shirt, seated right there.
And right there, you're pointing at counsel table?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Wilson or?
Your Honor, at this time, I would ask that the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant as the driver of the motor vehicle on 5-4.
Without objection.
The record will reflect ID.
Thank you.
We're gonna maintain decorum. If we can't maintain decorum, there's gonna be problems. Continue.
Thank you. Now, could you tell me, sir, going back to your observations on the road, this area that you've described, Pennsylvania and Miller, and then the 5900 block of South Cedar, what is the lighting like in this area?
It's surrounded right next to Meyer, so there's multiple street lamps in the roadway.
And at the time of this stop, so I guess the question is, would you consider it to be a well-lit area?
Yes.
Okay. And at the time of this traffic stop, what was the condition of the natural light? Was it daytime, nighttime?
Nighttime.
So you indicated that the defendant had documents in his hand and you made contact. Did you ask him for anything specific?
Yes.
Was he able to provide what you asked him for?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have further contact with him?
Yes.
And what was that contact?
A narcotic trained canine was on scene to conduct a free air sniff of the vehicle. I had asked him to step out of the vehicle after he had already provided me with his documentation. Prior to stepping out of the vehicle, the defendant reached into the center console, which is abnormal from my training and experience when I had already been provided with sufficient documents, and the sole objective is to step out of the vehicle.
And what did you do with that information?
I then reached into the vehicle and grabbed a hold of his arm and escorted him out.
Did he comply?
Yes.
What, if anything, did you do next?
I had additional officers positioned at the driver's side with me. At that time, we then conducted a Terry pat down of this person.
And did you do the pat down or another officer?
Another officer while I secured his arms.
Okay. So when you say we, you were working in as a group, but you yourself did not conduct the pat down, is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Did you have any further contact with the defendant?
Yes.
And what was that?
One of the officers that conducted the pat down located suspected cocaine on his person. At this time, he was advised that he was under arrest. I then read him his Miranda rights via my department issued advice rights card verbatim. He refused to answer any questions, so I did not question him.
Did you have any further contact with him?
Yes.
And what was that?
At the conclusion of the traffic stop, I transported him to LPD lockup for booking.
And did he make any statements during that time that would be pertinent to your investigation?
Yes.
And what was that?
During the booking process, the detention staff officer asked me what his charges were. When I relayed what the charges were, the defendant made an excited utterance and told me that it's powder, not crack cocaine. It's that good shit. Powder's that good shit.
Did you ask him any further questions regarding that statement?
No.
Did that conclude your contact with him?
Yes.
Did you have any contact? You indicated that suspected cocaine was found on his person. Did you do anything with that suspected cocaine?
All the evidence was turned over to Tri-County Metro, who was on scene at the time of the stop.
So you did not test it or weigh the material?
No.
I'm sorry. No, you did not?
No, I did not.
Thank you. I have no further questions at this time for this witness, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Before we begin the council approach.
Yes. Mr. Now is the time where cross-examination is to occur. Mr. Austin's telling me that you don't want him to do cross-examination, you want to do it yourself.
I just want to ask him a couple questions.
Well, why don't you give the questions to the attorney who is trained and understands the rules of evidence and has done this before so that he can ask them? I'm sorry.
I know him too.
You know the rules of evidence?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about MRE 801. Do you know what that is?
It don't matter.
It does matter.
Statute penal code.
But that's
Like,
my,
relevant.
no. So the rules of evidence are different than the stack of penal codes. So the penal codes are what's illegal, right? The rules of evidence are what guides us on what can come into court and how we bring it into court. It's a different set of rules. And so Mr. Austin went to school for approximately 7 years or so to learn how to be a lawyer and be licensed. And he's been practicing law for, has it been 10 years now, Mr. Austin?
Almost 15.
Oh, see, longer than I thought.
So what is,
So he's experienced in doing that. In general, you do have the right to self-representation, but often you're at a disadvantage if you do that because you don't have the same training that the lawyers have in order to know to ask all the questions. So I can let you ask a couple questions, but if you ask 2 questions and sit down, you're done. Your lawyer might have had 15 more questions that were totally relevant to your case. You see?
okay, yeah,
Okay. So what are we doing?
I'm asking a question.
Okay, so Mr. Austin's not asking questions. You're doing it.
I'm gonna ask him a question, yes.
Ask who a question? No, so you have to choose at this moment. You can't have it both ways. Either your lawyer is representing you and he'll ask the questions, or you're going to represent yourself. Your lawyer's not asking any questions at all.
To him, right?
Well, no, so you have to make a choice for the case.
You can't.
For this moment, this hearing.
So what are you saying? I can't question him, and then he can't question the rest?
No, you can't both do it. It doesn't work that way.
That's why I said I need to get my own lawyer and do my own thing.
That doesn't change anything right now. So why don't you, rather than disregarding counsel, tell Mr. Austin what questions you'd like to ask, and he will attempt to ask them within the framework of the rules of evidence.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a moment, Your Honor.
Yeah, of course.
Good afternoon, officer.
Good afternoon.
So, understand, were you alone in your patrol vehicle when you initiated the traffic stop?
Yes.
And you said you initiated this traffic stop and the reason for that was the window tint, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And are you saying that there was too much window tint on the window, or that it was illegal for there to be any tint on the window?
It's illegal for there to be window tint on the driver.
So it wasn't an issue of how much, you're saying it was an issue that he didn't have any or shouldn't have had any on there, period, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And we're talking about, this is what, approximately 10 o'clock at night, is that correct?
9:26 was the time of the traffic stop.
Okay, so a little before 9:30, in other words.
Yes.
And it's May, so is it still light out or dark out?
It was dark out.
And you said when you initiated the traffic stop, the vehicle complied, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you said when you asked the driver to produce certain things, the driver did so, is that correct?
Correct.
And at what point did the additional officers arrive that you were talking about?
Almost immediately.
Did you specifically call for them?
No.
And who were those additional officers, if you recall?
Officer Anthony Dean and Officer Lexi Robinson were with her canine.
And where were they at in relation to you while you were conducting this traffic stop?
I don't know where they necessarily were, but when I asked them to step out of the vehicle, Officer Dean and several other officers were next to the driver window with me.
And at what point are we talking about in this interaction? Did you say that the driver did something as it relates to the center console?
When I asked him to step out of the vehicle.
And he did end up stepping out of the vehicle, is that correct?
Yes.
And you stated that there was a Terry pat down conducted, is that right?
Correct.
And can't remember if you stated in your testimony, was that done by you or another officer?
By another officer while I held back his arms.
And which officer was that?
Officer Dean.
Did he initiate that Terry pat down or did you instruct him to?
I don't recall.
And what was the reason in your mind at that point why there was a Terry pat down being conducted?
For multiple different reasons, including he had already provided me sufficient documentation, and at the request of me stepping out of the vehicle, or for him to step out of the vehicle, reaching back towards the center console is uncommon, with really no reason to do so. And I know from my training and experience that oftentimes weapons are concealed within vehicles within the center console, or hidden areas that are hard for law enforcement to detect. Also, in addition, when I did reach into the vehicle to help escort him out and secure his arms behind his back, his arm is very tense, as if he was going to cause resistance to the pat down.
And during a traffic stop, there are legitimate reasons why someone would be reaching into, for example, a console or glove box. Is that true?
Yes.
And in fact, that does happen sometimes on traffic stops. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when the driver was doing whatever he was doing with the center console, you didn't see any type of weapon or contraband at that point. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And at any time, did you or the other officers forcibly or attempt to forcibly open the driver's side door of the vehicle?
I don't recall. However, it's possible that I did.
I think it's all the question I have for this witness, Your Honor.
Redirect?
No, Your Honor, thank you. This witness may be excused.
Okay.
May I call the next witness? Thank you, Your Honor. The people would call to the stand Officer Anthony Dean.
Get to the top there with me. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Your questions for witness Dean.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir. Are you employed?
I am
How are you employed, sir?
with Lansing Police Department.
And how long have you been with the Lansing Police Department?
Just under 7 years.
What is your current position or assignment with the Lansing Police Department?
Road patrol.
And prior to your current position of road patrol, did you have a different assignment?
I did, yes.
And what was that assignment?
I was a temporary detective with the Tri-County Metro Narcotics Task Force.
And when you say temporary detective, what does that mean?
It's a temporary assignment, so I was there for around 3.5 years, working narcotics cases in the Ingham County, or Tri-County area, I'm sorry.
And what is the full purpose of Tri-County?
To investigate mid to high level narcotics traffickers, also low sometimes, but to combat the sale of illicit narcotic sales.
And in that assignment, are you working in an undercover capacity?
Correct, yes.
Do you have specific training as it relates to either narcotics trafficking or working in an undercover capacity?
Yes.
And that was a compound question that I should not have asked. So let's take the first part as it relates to undercover narcotics training. Do you have any?
Correct, yes.
And what is that?
Went to undercover narcotic school. Training from those of my teammates from past, things of that nature.
And in your capacity on Tri-County Metro Narcotics, have you acted in the capacity as an undercover officer?
I have, yes.
And when you're working as an undercover officer, what are you doing?
Making contact with known narcotics traffickers, making contact with confidential informants, attempts to set up narcotics deals, either with the confidential informant or with yourself, between yourself and the dealer.
Do you work with specific narcotics or a variety?
Variety.
Okay. And what narcotics have you worked in an undercover capacity with before?
Heroin, fentanyl, methamphetamine, cocaine base, crack cocaine, numerous types of pills, things of that nature.
Okay. Now you answered cocaine base and crack. What is the difference between those, sir?
Cocaine, excuse me, I misspoke. Cocaine HCl is the powder form, and the cocaine base is, it has a base is normally comes back as crack. So when you test crack cocaine, it comes back as cocaine base. This is a mixture.
So focusing on cocaine for a moment, then, it would seem from your testimony that there are two types of cocaine. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
A powder form, yes?
Yes.
And what you've identified as crack cocaine, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And how does crack cocaine appear?
Rock-like, harder than powder.
And are you able, based on your training and experience, able to visually identify cocaine,
Yes.
both powder and crack?
Correct, yes.
Focusing your attention to powder cocaine, how does it appear?
Normally white in color, powdery, normally in between the consistency of like powdered sugar and regular sugar, but not quite the both.
Does it have a specific feel?
It does, yeah.
And is there a way that you can articulate that in words?
Granulated, I guess you could say, maybe.
And have you ever felt a baggie of powder cocaine?
I have, yes.
Did you ever feel that as you went through your trainings?
Yes.
And was there ever a time when you felt a substance that you suspected to be cocaine and that was confirmed as cocaine?
Yes.
Were you on duty on May 4th, 2023?
I was.
And on that date, you've indicated that you are road now, but prior Tri-County. On the May 4th date, what was your assignment?
Road patrol.
Okay. And what were you doing on that date?
I was working in conjunction with Tri-County Metro in hotspot policing for known narcotics trafficking areas.
Was Tri-County targeting a specific location or locations?
Yes.
And what were those?
Motels in the south side of Lansing.
What was your role on that day?
My role was to stop vehicles that had a violation coming from those known high trafficking areas in the city of Lansing.
Were you in a marked unit?
I was, yes.
Were you in full uniform?
I was, yes.
And on that date and time, did you make a traffic stop, or I'm sorry, were you involved in a traffic stop of a black Chrysler 300?
I was, yes.
And where did that traffic stop occur?
On Cedar, I don't know the exact numbers, but I think it was around the 5700 block, so around there.
Are you familiar with the Meyer on Pennsylvania and Cedar?
I am, yes.
Was it near that location?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And what was your role in that contact?
I was a secondary officer, a backup officer, to help assist the primary officer with getting the driver out of the vehicle prior to a canine sniff search.
And is that a common operating procedure to have an occupant or occupants exit the vehicle before a canine approaches?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And so you proceeded to that location, is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. And did you make contact with the vehicle that I've described?
I did, yes.
And at the time that you arrived, did you see an occupant?
I did, yes.
Was the occupant within or out of the vehicle?
At the time, he was in the vehicle.
Okay. Do you see the occupant here today?
I do, yes.
Could you please indicate something that he's wearing today?
White dress shirt.
Seated at the table.
Yeah, seated at the table, right, yeah.
Thank you, Your Honor. May the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant as the occupant of the vehicle on May 4th, 2023.
Without objection.
Record will reflect, thank you.
Thank you. And at the time of your arrival, sir, what did you do?
I assisted the primary officer with getting, escorting the driver out of the vehicle.
How did you do that?
We asked him to step out, and he started to step out. At that point, he started to make further movements towards the left side of his body, and we stopped him from doing that.
When you say furtive movements, what specifically did you see?
I seen his right hand go towards the left side of his body.
And what was your concern, if any, at that time?
My concern was possibly trying to reach for a weapon or to somehow just get rid of some sort of evidence.
What happened next?
At that point, we grabbed onto him and began to give him a pat down of his person.
At the time that you saw those movements, was his door open?
It was, yes.
And when I say his door, I mean the driver's side door of the vehicle.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you. Now, who conducted the pat down, sir?
I did.
And how do you do a pat down?
Systematically, normally from the waistband down each leg, and then kind of go to the top of the body.
And what are you looking for?
Weapons, and illicit narcotics or anything of evidence, evidentiary value that could be illicit, I guess.
That you could feel from the outside of the clothing, is that correct?
Yes. You're not going in pockets, you're literally patting down the outer layer of clothing.
Okay. And you said you conducted that pat down?
Correct, yes.
And as you conducted that pat down, did something draw your attention?
Yes.
And what part of his clothing was the item located?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
I asked if something drew your attention.
Correct.
To which you said yes.
Yes.
Okay. Was it one item?
It was one.
Okay. And my question follow-up then was, what portion of his clothing contained the item that drew your attention?
Underwear. Later found out underwear, but I felt it on the outer layer of his clothing, pants.
Pants. Okay. And what is it? How would you describe what you felt as you conducted the pat down?
A hard rock-like substance.
And based on your training and experience handling narcotics, did you believe it to be a controlled substance?
I did, yes.
Okay. And what did you base that on?
Based off my training experience, of the multiple times where I came in contact with narcotics that are hard in nature, like crack cocaine, I believe that to be narcotics, especially where it was located or where I felt it at on his person.
And could you approximate with something of common knowledge that everyone here would know as to the size?
Just a little smaller than a golf ball.
And when you felt that, sir, what, if anything, did you do?
I asked the suspect if he could tell me what it was, and he did not answer.
You provided no answer whatsoever?
No answer.
Okay, so what did you do next?
At that point, I secured him and I retrieved the item.
And when you retrieved the item, what did it look like?
Crack cocaine.
And how was it packaged?
In a plastic sandwich baggie.
Is there anything of note, sir, about the fact that it was in a plastic baggie?
I'm not sure if I understand the question. I'm sorry.
That's okay. You indicated on your time with Tri-County Metro Narcotics, you worked as an undercover, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And was part of that time spent making purchases of narcotics?
Yes.
Is there a way, typically, understanding it's not a 100%, but typically, is there a way that narcotics are packaged?
Typically, they're in sandwich bags.
Similar to what you located here?
Correct, yes.
And you indicated that you are familiar with the appearance of both powder and crack cocaine. Did the item that you located on his person appear consistent with your knowledge of crack cocaine?
It did, yes.
And was that as it relates to color?
Color, feel, the way it looked, all those things.
What did you do with the suspected narcotics?
I put it on my patrol car and then eventually turned over to Tri-County Metro Narcotics.
Did you have any further contact with the defendant?
I did not know.
Thank you. I have nothing further for this witness, Your Honor.
Cross.
Sure, thank you. Good afternoon.
Yeah.
So you were talking about assisting the primary officer in this matter, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Who was that primary officer?
Officer Uberoff.
And you said you were in a full police uniform during this, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And were you by yourself or was somebody else on a patrol vehicle?
At that moment, or was I riding with someone?
Correct.
Correct, yes, I was.
And who was that?
Sergeant Dykens.
And did you witness Officer Uberoff conduct the traffic stop of the vehicle?
I did not witness it right away. I heard it go out and then I went to back him.
Did Officer Uberoff specifically call for you or did you just hear it and do that on your own volition?
Heard it and just went on my own.
And you know how long after you arrived after Officer Uberoff had already pulled over the vehicle?
I do not know.
And so you arrive and you get out to further assist Officer Uberoff, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Other than you and Officer Uberoff, did you see any other officers there at that point?
Yeah, there were other officers there. Sergeant Dykens was there. That's all I can remember right now.
So we're talking maybe a total of 3 or 4 officers that you saw, including yourself?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And you were describing the pat down that took place to the driver, is that right?
Correct, yes.
And is that the Terry pat down that you're talking about?
Correct, yes.
And is that something that you decided to do yourself or did someone instruct you to do that?
No one instructed me to do it. Like I said, I witnessed further movements from the defendant to keep him from reaching for things. I detained him as if he was already detained and I conducted a check back.
And when you're talking about furtive movement, exactly what are you talking about? You talking about a reaching, a jerking, or what?
Reaching and jerking.
And was the driver instructed not to be doing that?
Yeah, I'm sure he was, yeah.
Did you personally witness or hear that instruction?
I can't remember that off the top of my head right now.
So in other words, if it was, you have no independent recollection.
I'm sorry, say that again.
If that did happen, you have no independent recollection of it. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
And you were describing an item that was located on the driver. And this was an item that was beneath the clothing or the pants of the driver. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And was the item further located within the undergarments of the driver?
Yes.
So in other words, 2 layers of clothing that we're talking about, is that right?
Yeah.
And the substance that was recovered was in a bag, is that correct?
Correct.
And when you're doing a pat down or a Terry pat down, you're specifically looking for either weapons or some type of contraband, is that right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And you're saying when you come across this substance, you were able to immediately tell that it was some type of narcotics?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Even though it was through 2 layers of clothing and in a sandwich bag?
Yes.
And is there some way you could distinguish what you were feeling in that pat down between something else non-narcotics related?
I'm not sure if I understand what you're asking.
Let me try to ask it a different way.
Okay.
Is there something specific towards the feel or the touch of narcotics that makes you immediately recognize it as such as opposed to something else?
I knew it was narcotics because you could hear the sandwich baggie crunching, and then I could feel what I believe to be narcotics based on my training experience of 3.5 years undercover dealing with narcotics solely.
And could you conclusively say when you felt that it was narcotics as opposed to something else?
Yes.
To the exclusion of everything else?
Correct. Yes.
And is this something that you were talking about in the course of your training and what you talked about in the undercover narcotics school?
Yeah.
And how long did that training last? What did that consist of?
Well, you're always going through trainings while you're in that unit, but that specific undercover school was a week. But you go to multiple other schools related to narcotics.
But the specific undercover school that you're talking about, undercover narcotics school, was a week, did you say?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. That, when you say that, is that 5 days?
Correct. Yes. 5 days.
How many hours a day?
I believe 8, but I can't remember exactly how long the day was.
And is that something where you primarily listen to lectures and so forth, or do they have you actually doing something interactive or some type of field type work?
Interactive and lectures.
And is there some type of proficiency test that they have you take at the end of that?
I don't remember. I don't think so, no.
And during any of that training, was there ever, as a part of that training, did they have you, for example, feel narcotics in baggies as well as some other non-narcotic substances to see if you could tell the difference?
Yeah, they had fake narcotics there, and then they also showed us real narcotics, so yes.
Did they just show you, or did they actually have
We
you?
were able to feel them, correct, yes.
And is that something you did once or more than once, or do you recall?
Throughout the week.
What were some of the other substances, do you know?
Methamphetamine, powder cocaine, crack cocaine.
Did they have any non-narcotics substances?
So they had fake powder cocaine, like it was just baking soda or something like that.
Do you have any other fake substances, or is that just that one that you could recall?
That I can recall, or just that.
And what are you specifically looking for or feeling for when you're doing a pat down under multiple layers of clothing that would indicate that that substance is a narcotic as opposed to baking powder or something else?
Like you said earlier, looking for firearms or any illicit contraband.
Let me ask it a different way. When you're doing a pat down, is there something specific to what you're feeling that makes you immediately recognize it as a narcotic or a drug as opposed to baking powder or something else?
Well, it wasn't baking powder because it was hard, and I knew it to be crack cocaine based off of my training experience.
Are there any other substances that could be hard like that that could mimic powder cocaine that could not in fact be cocaine?
I'm sure there is, but I don't know any that feel like that.
You recognize it's possible though, is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And having a controlled substance in a baggie, that's something that users will do as well. Is that correct? They will transport or have their narcotics in a baggie sometimes. Is that right?
Users as well as dealers, correct, yes.
And did you or did you witness any other officers try to forcibly open the door on the vehicle during that traffic stop encounter?
I don't recall.
And did you see a drug dog there during this encounter?
No, I don't think one showed up.
All right, thank you. It's all the questions I had.
Before we conclude that, you mentioned that you felt the item through the pants, and you also said you found out it was in his underwear.
Yes.
Can you tell me where?
I'm sorry, where it was in his underwear?
Yeah, like where his pockets were, or
Like near his genitalia on the right thigh.
thank you. Any additional questions based on the court's questioning, Mr. Austin?
No, thank you.
Ms. Housefield, you redirect.
Yes, thank you. Sir, you indicated that your assignment that night was hotspot policing with Tri-County Metro, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Specifically focusing on hotel motels, is that correct? Okay, you call that interdiction, yes?
Correct, yes.
Okay, what is hotel motel interdiction?
Basically, we usually have undercover narcotics watch the hotels to observe vehicles go for short stays, which is indicative of narcotic sales. Normally we do these are at hotels that are getting a lot of complaints for narcotics dealings and overdoses, things of that nature.
Okay, so you said short stays, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And that's essentially a term of art in the narcotics world, is it
Correct,
not?
yes.
Okay, and what is a short stay?
Short stay is when a vehicle goes in and immediately comes out within 5 minutes. That is it's not a dead set, but those are normally how fast deals go down based off of training experience, obviously.
Okay, so there are members of Tri-County that are watching the hotel for this type of short stay, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And that information is radioed out
Correct,
to, you would be called like a roller, a marked unit to make stops, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so were you given information that the Chrysler 300, the vehicle that was the basis of this stop, had been involved in a short stay?
Yes.
Okay, so in addition to what you were feeling, you had this information that his vehicle had been observed making a short stay at a hotel known for trafficking, is that correct?
Objection leading.
Ms. Housefield leading?
It was, I can rephrase.
Was, yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. So, you had the plain feel that you've testified to,
Correct, yes.
and you received radio traffic from another member of the team.
Correct, yes.
And what was that traffic?
That there was a black 300 that was a short stay at America's Best Hotel.
Do you have any information to know that the vehicle you stopped was the vehicle that was observed?
I didn't stop it, but
I'm sorry, that was stopped.
the plate was given over the radio.
And did that short stay information play into your determination on the traffic stop?
Correct, yes.
And how did it do that?
Based off of the short stay at a known high-level narcotics trafficking, a hotel where there's a lot of trafficking, a lot of overdoses, that also played into how we handled the situation.
Thank you. I have nothing further at this time for this witness, Your Honor.
You may step down.
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay.
Yes. Your Honor, at this point in time, the people will be calling Detective Stacy, who is currently in an undercover capacity.